So I could just be laying back on the couch watching cartoons, but no, here we are live streaming, and I'm glad to be doing it. This is Beyond Belief Sobriety. This is a podcast for people who are seeking a secular path to recovery from addictions of all kinds. We're also a community. We do a lot of good things here together to support one another in our desire to stay sober through a secular path, of course. We live stream every Saturday, me and my co-host Mary at 11 o'clock a.m. Central Time, 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, and Google to figure out what time it is where you are. So before I blab any further, let's bring Mary out to say hello to her. This is something new. Yay, Mary, how are you? Oh, I got to unmute you, or you got to unmute yourself.
Thank you.
That's the catchphrase for our world post-COVID is you're on mute.
You're on mute. I am unmuted and I'm here and I'm happy to be here.
That's good to see you. So how was your experience last week for your first ever live stream?
First ever live stream, scary. And then I had technical issues. So as soon as I said, my name is Mary, I'm an alcoholic, and it cut off, there was a couple of minutes of sheer terror, and then I figured it out. So I'm actually learning a little bit about technology in the process and getting more comfortable.
Yeah, you know, that's one thing I have always enjoyed about this podcast and even live streaming is what I learn from just the technical aspect of doing it, and then from the guest and from my co-host and from the people who write and call and everything like that. So it's a good thing to do. Better than laying on the couch watching cartoons.
Yeah, it's good to be challenged. That's how I take it, as a challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So today we have a guest. His name is Ryan Barnard. Hey, John Baca, how you doing out there? Who else is out there? We've got right now 5 people out there. So if you'd like to make a comment, just go ahead and do so right there in the live chat, and we'll know that you're there. And then later on, we'll open up the phone line so you can call in if you'd like to yell at us or whatever you want to do. You want to make a comment. But anyway, we do have a guest today, and he's coming all the way from Johannesburg, South Africa. His name is Ryan Barnard, and he is really an interesting guy. I met him in one of our private one-on-one meetings that I'm doing with podcast listeners. He listens to the podcast, and hey, Joe, and hey, Bobbert. He knows that he heard that I was doing these one-on-one meetings, so he scheduled one with me. Hey, Gilbert. And so we talked for a little bit, and I thought, wow, this guy's really interesting. And I thought, I'd love to have you on the podcast. So I invited him. Then he was sick for a couple of weeks, so we didn't record. And then Mary and I started doing the live stream. So I said, hey, Ryan, come on our live stream. So without any further ado, let me bring Ryan on now. Here we go. Pop him on the stream. And I'm going to add, hey, Ryan, how are you?
Hey, John. Hey, Mary. How are you doing?
Good.
Good. Yeah.
It is very nice of you.
I'm a little bit nervous with the live streaming, but see how it goes.
Yeah, it can be nerve-wracking, but I want to tell you that the audience is very friendly here. We had a super big mess up last week, and they were so kind to us. So anyway, that's Mary. This is Fred from Oregon is saying hello. Let's pop his little message up there. That's Mary. That's Fred from Oregon.
Hey, Fred.
There's Joe C.
Hey, Joe.
Gilbert. Bobbert. And John. So there's a few of them there, and more people will be coming in, I'm sure. So anyway, what I learned about Ryan that I found so interesting is he is a person in recovery from addiction, and he also has ADHD. And he was telling me that the ADHD was really challenging his recovery until he got treated for it. And he was taking medication for his ADHD, and it made a tremendous difference for him. But for some reason, the people in his NA group didn't think that he was clean because he was taking that medication. So he stopped, and that just about killed him. So since that time, he has been passionate about educating the public and helping people that are duly diagnosed. And one question I'm going to ask him is, who isn't duly diagnosed? But anyway, without further ado, let's say hello to Ryan. Hey, Ryan.
Cool. Hey, guys. Thanks very much for having me.
Did I introduce you properly? Did I give you a synopsis?
There was a small inaccuracy. So when I stopped taking the medication, it was I went through a really tough time. It wasn't sort of, catastrophic, but there was definitely a major change in the quality of my life, and yes, it made a big difference. So,
well, why don't we start? Why don't you introduce yourself through your story? Let us know what actually happened.
okay, well, so look, I mean, growing up and going to school was a miserable time. I really didn't do very well at school at all, ever. And I'll give you an example. There was this teacher that had this in maths class. She had this the setup where there were these rows, and obviously the cleverest person at the end of the one row, and then sort of like there was this hierarchy, and I was at the very front of like the stupid row, right?
Oh.
And it was really, I really struggled at school. I failed. In fact, I failed grade 10 twice. Ultimately, I think you guys talk about graduating, so I did graduate from school, and I went on to get a diploma in IT engineering. But the entire experience was just really miserable. My report cards were horrible, and so I did start using sort of and drinking a lot and sort of getting up to no good while I was at school. I think that's a hallmark of sort of most ADHD kids is they get up to no good, and I think the differential diagnosis is oppositional defiance disorder. So that's sort of people that are very I think they graduate into being almost psychopaths, right? When they get out of school because they're so antisocial. Okay, so yeah, so I started drinking and getting up to no good, and I was shipped off when I was 17 to this rehab center in the middle of the Karoo. So the Karoo is like a kind of very barren, weird desert type of landscape between Cape Town and Joburg, right? And so the winters are like extremely cold, and the nights are extremely cold, and the days are like really hot. And anyway, I was shipped off to this. It was like a very ultra religious. I sort of refer to it as like a Nazi brainwash Christian camp, right? And so what you've got to remember is sort of in South Africa. So in like the late 70s, early 80s, there was a strong culture of like hardcore masculinity, right? And that's as a result of the guys having being conscripted into the army. It was compulsory, and the guys running this camp, this place, they were hardcore. I mean, the kind of stuff that we had to do was nuts, like. So you'd wake up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and you'd just have like you'd get not very much food at all. And we had to kind of do all this hardcore PT, running up and down hills and marching and reading the Bible and all sorts of crazy stuff. And so I was there for a couple of months, and what happened was one of the guys that I was there with passed away. He died. And there was a big court case about it. So the guys that were running the place were accused of murder. This guy was he was a heroin addict, and he was withdrawing from heroin, and he kind of refused to participate in the PT, either because he couldn't or he was just being sort of belligerent, and he was found in this like lockup cage thing with a chain around his neck, and he had all these bruises, and it's actually crazy. I was reading the article of that. I'll send it to you, John. You can post it in the link if you want. I was reading the article about it today, and the magistrate or the judge that was doing the case for the guys that were charged with the murder, he was an ultra old school kind of one of these masculine sort of guys that were in the army, and he was like, well, this guy was, he deserved what he got, and well, he didn't say he deserved what he got, but he was like, the tactics that these guys used was nothing more serious than what was used in the army in the old days. So he found them not guilty, which was quite interesting, I think. So anyway, so yeah, moving on from that, there was another 5 years of like mayhem. So the addiction started escalating. I started taking party drugs and drinking a hell of a lot more. I was drinking, I was drinking every day. And ultimately, I ended up in a place where I was just completely hopeless, incredibly hopeless. I didn't think I could stop using or drinking. And, I didn't want to go to rehab. My experience of rehab was kind of not cool. So I was
Yeah,
like,
was that prison camp place an actual rehab? Was they're trying to help you there? Is that what?
So yeah, they were a rehab. They weren't registered at the time, from what I understand. So rehabs need to be registered with the Department of Social Development and the Department of Health. And there's a very sort of like high standard of they call it the minimum norms and standards, right? So I don't know. I've got to look into it, but I don't think these guys were registered. I think they were operating outside of the confines of the law. And
But that bad experience nonetheless, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, no, it was rough. So but weird thing is I was in there with the guy and it was crazy. When I got out of that rehab, I'd made a friend in the place, and he phoned me when I got out, and he said, "Listen, let's have a rehab reunion." And I knew what that meant. So he invited me off to one of his buddies' houses, who I knew from school very vaguely. And this guy was a drug addict, but I wasn't the same kind of drug addict as this guy. I mean, I was using like sort of mild stuff compared to what these guys were doing. And anyway, so I got to this guy's house and they were using crack and heroin. And I'd never really done that kind of thing. So they introduced me to it. And it was very interesting. So it's cut a long story short, I saw the guy 5 years later at an NA meeting. One of the guys that I was there with, and he came up to me, and I was so surprised to see him. I thought he should have been dead, like the way this guy carried on, right? He was nuts. And anyway, so I saw him and he said, "Listen, that night our plan was to get you as wasted as possible so that we could rob you." But what ended up happening was I ended up using all of their drugs, right? So, but cut a long story short, this guy became our best friend. And we sort of really got stuck into together. We got stuck into going to NA meetings and doing H&I and sort of, helping the next addict and so on and so forth. And he came from a rehab that I would have to say indoctrinated him into this whole 12-step ideology, right? And they were quite that rehab and this friend that I'd made were quite hectic around the whole medication issue. So if you're on meds, you're not clean. And I mean, he said it to me before. This guy, he said that was his opinion. Nonetheless, we still remain friends and very good friends. And so we kind of agreed to disagree, and which was really cool. So I started going to meetings with him, and over the years, there were times where I'd be at a meeting and someone would be doing a share, and they'd say, sort of veiled as their experience, but they'd share their opinion on medication, right? And they'd be like, "Well, if you're on meds, you're not clean." And I remember being at one specific meeting where this guy shared, and he said that, and I was sitting next to another friend who was always incredibly depressed, right? And he was on antidepressants, and I remember looking at him and just thinking, geez, like that's not cool for him to have to hear this kind of stuff, right? Or me. I mean, I'm on meds. How am I supposed to attain this sort of unattainable ideal of being clean that I could never meet? I have to be on medication. If I'm not, I run businesses. I live in Johannesburg. I need to be able to function correctly and form full sentences, right? Which I struggle with even on the meds. Okay, anyway, this guy that I was sitting next to a couple of years later committed suicide. And who knows if he had come off his meds, or I'm not saying he came off the meds because of what this guy said. But I mean, suicide's not a joke. Suicide, it's the ultimate ending. It's ultimate sacrifice, right? It's you know, it's not something anybody does lightly. And if medication is going to make a difference in somebody's lives, in somebody's life, then so be it, you know. But I really don't know where this idea of being on meds is. I think I know where it comes from. It's like, I understand if you take something that has a tranquilizing effect, you know, you can open the door to kind of your addiction and sort of, you know, and then you know, end up going full tilt, right? Okay, the powerlessness, right? So I understand that, but there's safe medications out there. There are, you know, people do it in an informed way. They speak to their doctor, and they, you know, they're open and honest, and their intentions are in the right place, and they have a genuine issue. Then there's no reason why somebody can't be on medications to help improve their quality of life.
I think it's fairly common in 12-step rooms. I know in AA, I was told early on that I shouldn't take antidepressants, which was when I started taking them, it was a big game changer for me. And I think that the where they were coming from with me was that I'm depressed because I'm an alcoholic, and I just needed to have a spiritual awakening, so that it wasn't that I needed medication or therapy or anything like that. I just needed to go to meetings and pray, and do a better job of that. But I think in NA they might have a different issue, because, you know, in AA we're only concerned about alcohol, so technically you could do anything else. But in NA it's all about being clean, and there's a probably I don't know, is there more of a dogmatic emphasis on it in some way?
I don't know. NA, I mean, obviously NA and AA both officially are, you know, I think they've got pamphlets. Both organizations have pamphlets that outline, you know, that it's okay in times of illness, I think it's called, that you're, you know, it's okay to take medication. But this orthodox, this hardcore orthodox, I call it orthodox, right? I don't know what else to call it, but it's I call it a hardcore orthodox ideology. Okay. And I personally believe that the people in those fellowships, I don't know if you guys know Jordan Peterson. I love the guy. I watch him all day long. I wish I could articulate myself as well as him, but he talks about being ideologically possessed. Okay. And how you know when somebody is ideologically possessed is when, you know, they give you one or two axioms of their particular ideology. You can pretty much say exactly what it is that they believe. And, you know, when somebody says, oh, well, I'm not going to take you through your step 4 unless you get off your meds, or you're not clean if you're on meds, you know, they're a Nazi. You know what I mean? I'm going to use that word if that's okay. It's but so yeah, I think it's in both fellowships. It's like it's genuine, and it also generally comes from the guys that are like, they believe in this esoterical kind of sort of stuff. Like, they're very superstitious, if I can put it that way, as well. You know, and I'm sort of going to tie this in with your beyond belief topic. But I think generally, you know, like, people will say, oh, well, you know, you that happened to you because of the way you behaved. And you know, the two things can be completely and entirely unrelated, but there's the superstitious idea, and I suppose you can call it karma if you want to. I don't believe that unrelated things necessarily, you know, cause each, you know, have an effect on each other, if that makes sense. But I mean, like, wildly unrelated things, you know, like, you don't get sick with, you know, terminal illness because you didn't do your step 4 properly, type of thing. You know what I mean?
So Ryan, you're wanting to bring awareness to the fact that people in the rooms tell other people that they can't take medications.
Yes.
And you want to leave that to the professionals, and you want people to know that it's okay to seek medical help and medical advice.
Look, on that note, you know, you come out of rehab, right? You've lost your job, your wife's left you, your kids don't want to talk to you, you're in a miserable, dark, depressing place, right? like you're gonna be depressed. Okay, so that's not necessarily the same as clinical depression, um, in a in its strictest form, if I can put it that way, right? So I don't want to sort of get stuck into too much technical stuff here. I'm going to screw it up, but um, uh, but yeah, you come out of treatment, you're going to be in a dark place, and it maybe it's not necessary that you go on medication. Maybe it is a case that you find a new way to live and sort of find new meaning through participating in the fellowship and doing the steps and so on and so forth, right? And maybe that gets you out of it,
But maybe it doesn't. Maybe you
maybe it
need,
doesn't.
right.
That's
Right.
right. That's
And
it. So
yeah. So you
mm,
just want to bring light to that subject so that, you know, I have felt that and I've heard that in rooms. I haven't been to NA meetings, so I can't speak for that. And I have heard that sort of, was just reading this week, there was an actor that I like very much, William Hurt. No, Bill, can't remember his last name. He was in The Big Chill. He passed away recently from a terminal illness, and it said that he refused to take pain medicine because he didn't want to break his long-term sobriety.
Wow.
And he was dying, and he was in hospice, and his children were writing the statement, and they just said, finally in his final days, he's agreed to take pain meds, but he was in a horrible pain. And I felt, when I read that, I thought that he would think that he needed painkillers because he was dying, that would break his sobriety somehow. So that shows me that it's not just you hearing that's sort of a common thing in the rooms. And I know a lot of people that struggle with ADHD that are sober in the rooms. And, myself, when I was going back to college, I went and got tested because someone said their child was being tested for it. And they go, I think you have it. You should get tested. So I did. And, they said I had moderate ADD and sort of gave me ways to study that would be helpful, and also medication, which I tried. And that particular thing didn't work for me. I didn't like the feel of it, but since then have found something that is not, that does work. And, but it's, I don't think it's for anyone in the rooms to tell another person, if they're not their doctor, what they can and cannot take.
yeah,
That becomes a group speak kind of thing, and then a pervasive, and you're trying to bring light to that and saying that's not right. Correct.
That's not right. No. So they sort of come with this pretext that they're going to be saving somebody's life if they tell them that they're on meds and get them off of the meds. I mean, that they really believe that.
Right. Well, it is a fine line, though, if the meds that they give you for ADHD were the particular meds that you abused when you were out there in the world. And I do know some people that are kind of afraid to go back on them as a sober person because they did abuse them previously.
So my answer to that is, it's 2022. Science has advanced. They're talking about, like serious life extension kind of stuff. I mean, genetics. Anyway, so the point that I'm trying to make is that the medication that I'm on for my ADHD is, I think that the word is dysphorogenic, I think it's dysphorogenic. So that means that it's devoid of the potential for abuse. If I take more of it than I am prescribed, or whatever the case, there's a very high risk I could have a seizure or something very bad could happen, right? And I don't feel the urge to abuse this stuff. Okay, so it's a fairly new medication. It's like, I don't know, like 10 or 11 years old, I think. I'm not sure, but it's so again, devoid of the potential for abuse. So if you, having said that, the axiom that the ideological possessed will use will say, oh, well, you can get addicted to Smarties if you, or to Excel spreadsheets. You know what I mean? It's
right. Yeah.
So, there's a lot of people that will experience this issue where they have a dual diagnosis, I guess, and have difficulty with sharing that in the rooms, or they might be afraid to be treated for it. and they might learn something from that experience. But not everybody starts a treatment center or a podcast. What's the story
Oh,
behind that?
so,
How did you do that?
so me and this buddy of mine that so this guy that I was introduced to from the guy that I was in the rehab with, and I saw him, at a meeting. This Brian, he became my best friend. He was a really, really good guy, and so I saw an opportunity came up, and he helped me found this treatment center, right? And initially, it was founded purely on sort of like 12-step principles. It wasn't really. There were very few healthcare professionals involved. It was more like a 12-step sort of orientated kind of place, and it was strictly, in a lot of ways, it brought in that sort of ideology that I've been talking about. So that's what it was really founded on. And what happened was Brian ended up relapsing after, I think, 11 years clean, and he died. He passed away. They found him in his bathroom with a needle in his arm, right? And when I looked at the work phone, I see he'd been sort of googling fentanyl, which I know in the States is it's doing a lot of damage there, right? So, and Brian was always, he was into opiates. That was his thing. So anyway, he died, and I was kind of like, when Brian passed away, I was kind of like put in this position where it's like, okay, well, I don't have sort of, Brian sitting sort of on my shoulder going, be careful of meds and wada. And, I was like, cool, I'm going to embrace this dual diagnosis thing, and I'm going to sort of transform this rehab into what I feel is best to help people, right? Well, not what I feel is best to help people, but sort of something that I relate to. It's like something that I'm passionate about, and because I'm duly diagnosed, and I know that people go through a hard time with it. That's the sort of direction I wanted to go in. So that's what happened with the rehab. Before I carry on, I want to sort of tell another quick story. So I had another very good friend that I've been friends with since I was 16. And about 4 or 5 years ago, he came to me and he said, listen, he needs help. He needs to go to rehab. He's not doing well, right? So his life's a mess and so on. So I referred him to this rehab that Brian had gone to, and that Brian was from. And because he couldn't come to my rehab because it would have been unethical, right? So anyway, I referred him to this place, and he was meant to have gone there for a month. He phoned me from the place and he said, listen, I want to stay for another couple of months. Can you pay for it? And I said, well, cool. Let me know how you're going to pay me back. And then that's fine. No problem. I didn't hear from him again until he'd gotten out. I knew he'd gotten out. I tried to call him a couple of times, didn't answer. Eventually, he phoned me and he said, listen, I need to come and meet you. So I said, cool. So he came and he met me and he said, listen, I can't associate with you. You're an addict and you're on medication. That means you're not clean. So this is a friend that I've had since I was 16. I mean, like, you know what I mean? I was horrified. These guys have thoroughly brainwashed him. They've done a good job of it. It was, and the ideology is again ideologically possessed. I have this. I'm wondering, is it okay for somebody to that's desperate, hopeless? They might die from their disease. Is it okay for them to go off and get brainwashed and sort of come back and live this weird brainwashed existence? I mean, is that better than them continuing to use and sort of being, I don't know. Do you get what I'm trying to say? It's like,
I do.
okay.
Yeah. Looking back in retrospect at my early years in recovery, I was pretty much conforming to what I thought I needed to do. And then many years later, I look back on it, I was like, what was I thinking? And in some ways I'm hard. In some ways it's like, I regret that I was so easy just to conform to someone else's idea or someone else's worldview and not stand up for my own. But on the other hand, I was sober, and life was getting better, and I did have friends. So there were good things, but looking back on it and having met people who were stronger than me now, who can stand up for their worldview and how they feel and their beliefs. Wow. It just really impresses me. I just wasn't that way. I was more of a, like, I'll just go along and get along, type of person.
And that's okay. So I think, you know, I was angry at first. I was incredibly angry at first. I was devastated, in fact. And that went on for like a long time. I was like horrified, and I was like, you know, so anyway, so I've since moved on from that, and I was like, it's okay. The guy's doing well. He's safe. He's clean. Able to look after his family. And that's all good, you know. So I just don't, you know, I just think I don't know if it's cool to go to that extent, and do that kind of thing, because I think it can be damaging. But anyway, so yeah, so what happened was, you know, as mentioned, I'm like very entrepreneurial, right? So and that sort of the ADD kind of helps with that. So I'm all over the place, and I've got what's called, I think, shiny penny syndrome. So I'll go off and I'll start see an opportunity and run with it, and I had this business that I'd been running since I was 19, and I went off and I started a restaurant about 5 months before the pandemic, which ended horrifically. And I ended up in the last 2 years really losing like a hell of a lot because of the pandemic and the effects from the lockdowns, and stupid decisions that I made, and things like that. And circumstantially, I got incredibly depressed. I was like, I ended up sort of, you know, on my bed. I'd wake up, come down for breakfast, have breakfast, and go back upstairs, and I'd park on the bed and watch TV, or just like, it was miserable. It was really not cool. I had no purpose. And that's what this podcast mission is all about, hey John. So it's about sort of finding a bit of purpose again, and sort of getting out there and doing something instead of being useless. I want to help people. I want to create something of value. So that's what that's all about.
Well, I was really impressed when I visited your YouTube channel about how well everything was done. You know, it's very professionally produced, it seems. And then I'm also just impressed that you got all these people working for you in this treatment center, these professionals, and who you interview on your podcast. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about, you know, what might be unique about the treatment that these people are offering that you might not see maybe at other places that aren't as aware of, you know, people who have, you know, dual problems.
So I've been doing a lot of research for a video that I'm putting together around sort of the rehab landscape in this country, and you get so the vast majority of rehab centers are 12-step based, right? So they have counselors, okay, like the word counselor, okay, and you know, the postman can be a counselor. You know what I mean? It's not protected by any law. It's not, you know, the word psychologist is protected. If somebody calls themselves a psychologist and they're not a psychologist, they will go to jail. They'll get locked up or they have to pay a fine. It's like, it's, you know, so the word counselor, so every man and their dog's calling themselves a counselor these days, save for registered counselors, which are psychology professionals, but not on the same sort of level as psychologists. So most rehabs have what are called addiction counselors. So there are some organizations out there that are doing a fair job in trying to regulate it. You know, addiction counselors, and get them properly trained up and all that kind of thing. But again, it's mostly people that have, you know, graduated from rehab, and by virtue of having graduated successfully from the treatment program, they go on to sort of, you know, work within the treatment center and become a counselor type of thing, right? So that goes on a hell of a lot. The standard of care that I'm sort of aiming for at ARC, at ARC, is, you know, I want qualified professionals doing the job. I think you can go to an AA meeting if you want to hear about the 12 steps, okay? Or we can get a dude in to come in on a Wednesday and he can tell you about the 12 steps, right? But I'm not going to offer you something that I'm not going to ask you to pay for something that you can get for free at a meeting, right? You know, I want to do a high quality, high standard type of treatment. So psychologists, obviously, I mean, they train for between 6 to 8 years to get their master's degree in psychology. So they, you know, it's hardcore, it's intensive, and they do what's called a ComServe. That's where they train at a government facility for, you know, 1 or 2 years under the supervision of other qualified professionals, psychologists. So yeah, so that's pretty much. I don't know. Did I answer your question, John?
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
And
And
now, can you?
is it inpatient or outpatient ARC?
So it's inpatient. We've sort of the psychologists do see patients on an outpatient basis after treatment on a one-on-one basis. So we did have an outpatient program that we were running. It was a group therapy 4 times a week, but we've had to shut that down because of obviously COVID and all the rest of it. But it's looking good that that's going to open up again, and sort of all the aftercare kind of processes are going to open up again. But it looks like the world's just sort of gone into this whole digital sort of direction, right? So
Yeah.
it's cool. We can get creative around those kinds of things to sort of help people, and I think there's more reach that we can also have.
Can you tell us about your podcast, and how did you ever learn to do everything as professionally as you do?
So I sort of become obsessed with stuff. So I'll spend so like it's funny. Hey, I mentioned Excel spreadsheets. Like I once missed Christmas because I was focusing on Excel spreadsheets. My wife wasn't very happy with me at the time. But I mean, that's one of the cool things about having ADD is that one of the symptoms is this hyper focus thing. So, and again, it's something that has, it affects me from an interpersonal point of view, because I'll become so hyper focused on editing the videos and trying to get them right. I think I could do a lot better, but I'm learning, right? But it irritates my wife. Like she's like, when you gonna go to bed? So I just sort of what I've been doing, John, with regards to the editing and that, I've been sort of learning via YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's what I do. Yeah.
yeah.
And what's the idea behind the podcast? What are you doing with that?
So nobody in South Africa. So I mean, when you watch a video of a addiction professional in South Africa, the audio is terrible, the video quality is terrible, and it's like, it's not cool. So I wanted to create some good quality content with high quality professionals, and sort of start sort of creating a benchmark, if you want to put it that way. So I'm hoping that other places are gonna see this and be like, and if they're entrepreneurial, whatever it is, if they're competitive, then get involved and start doing it as well. Because I think that's good. I think it's helpful to industries and things like that, right? So I like competition, and I like competing, and I like sort of doing that kind of thing. I enjoy it. It's fun. So it's not like a it can become I'll get resentful, and you know what I mean. But I think it's fun. I enjoy it. Yeah.
I look forward to watching that progress as you go along. I have to say, I think you're the first guest I've ever had who put on a tie to come on the live stream.
Cool.
That says something about you, I think.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Well, I actually, one of the first few videos I did, I was slouching and I was wearing this tie, and this guy left a comment, and he was like, he lambasted me. He was like, "You look unprofessional," and I was like, "Oh shit, okay, cool. I can do better," So that's where that's coming from.
No, you look good.
Thanks. Cool.
So what can you talk about what just for my own curiosity, what is the addiction problem like in South Africa? What is the recovery support group availability like? Is there, I don't know if you've even been to meetings in North America. Are there any differences between what you might find in South Africa compared to here? Can you talk about that?
I mean, the Minnesota model, right? I mean, does that ring a bell?
I guess so.
Hazelden.
Hazelden. Mm-hmm.
Hazelden, yeah. So there's a fair amount of that going on. But it's skewed, in terms of, like, the money in this country is sort of in the hands of like a very small minority and it's generally white people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's made up primarily of African people, right? Of black people. And so it's when you go to a meeting, you generally see white middle class people, and that irritates me, because You know, they go around touting that the big book's the only way to come right, or to find a solution. It's the only solution. And you know, what about these millions of people that live in a, you know, maybe a rural area, and all they've got is the local church, and you know, they're addicted to their traditional beer or whatever it is. So the sort of rehab landscape is very skewed towards obviously people with money. You know, it's I suppose that's you know, to be expected, right? But there are a lot of organizations that are really doing a good job of getting involved in communities that don't have a lot. And again, though, there's a lot of people with, you know, some with good intentions and some with ill intentions, that start rehabs and don't register them, and you know, people die. And it's you know, there was this video that I saw today of this guy who was, you know, he went to a treatment center that wasn't registered, and they tied this guy to a pole, and you know, just like he was withdrawing from heroin, and it was horrific what you know, what happened. And so yeah, so in terms of the 12-step fellowships and that kind of thing, can really bring, yeah, that's doing very, very well in this country. And that's weird, because, like, if, you know, 10 years ago, sort of when I was especially involved, it was like NA that was sort of the doing very well. But I don't know, I don't really travel out to the northern suburbs, or I don't know what's going on in Cape Town really, so who knows. But I know in the East Rand of Joburg, Cocaine Anonymous is really doing well, AA as always.
Do
That's
you have,
interesting.
go ahead. Do you have secular meetings there, non-religious AA meetings?
I don't know, maybe one or two. I haven't really heard of many.
I know there's at least one, because I did a podcast. I don't know if it's still going on though, but they
Okay.
would meet outside around the fire.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah. I think the pandemic might have,
That's true,
you know, killed off a couple of the minority meetings.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I thought it was interesting because South Africa kind of has a similar history to the United States when it comes to race relations, racism, and segregation. You know, and that it's like, you know, for us, you know, I know that apartheid ended in South Africa, but that doesn't mean that racism ended. That doesn't mean that there's full equality, just like here in the United States. And that shows itself in all aspects of society. What, like you said, when you walk into an AA meeting, you see white people. So I wonder if you know about, you know, any sort of outreach to underserved populations in South Africa. Is there anything being done to help people?
So there's an organization called the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, and they are doing such an amazing job with regards to getting professionals on their Facebook Live events that they do, like psychologists, and you know, they are really doing an excellent job. So, you know, I don't know about sort of outreach into like the really sort of far lying underserved communities, but I know SADAG are really helping a lot of people that don't have money, and that they can't afford sort of, you know, like high quality healthcare and things like that. So, you know, they've really got a high standard, and I'd like to actually talk to the people behind the, you know, the marketing and all of that, maybe hire them, because they're doing a really good job. So, but I think you know, I think I read somewhere the average IQ in this country is like 75 or something like that. So it's like I know in the States, from what I understand, the army doesn't accept people with an IQ of less than like 85, if I'm not sure, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know what that exact number is, but the IQ of the general, you know, population is so low because of lack of protein in their diet growing up. You know, and then so you got people growing up, then they you know, they lack of protein, low IQ situation going on. They don't have very many opportunities to sort of remove themselves from this poverty. They live in a 1-bedroom shack, you know, and they've all got to share, you know, like share a room. There's like 10 of them in a. It's it's horrifying, you know, and like, how do these people get out of the situation? How do you get them out of the situation? It's like, you know, some of them gravitate towards drugs and using glue. The rates of fatherlessness in the country is like through the roof, and that's the biggest sort of like indicator of somebody becoming a antisocial one day, especially in this country. So yeah, I think there's a lot going on, and we're kind of like stuck in the mud from that kind of point of view. And I don't know how to, you know, I wouldn't know how it is that you could help somebody sort of, you know, I don't know what they're going to do or what this country's going to do. It's difficult.
Joe has a comment here. He says on March 7th, he said it's March 7th, 2021. It's from the Secular Serenity Group of Cape Town, moderated by Rose, giving a history of secular AA in South Africa and heartfelt sharing from Gershwin. Are you saying, Joe, that was on, are you saying March 7th, 2022, that you had a speaker from Cape Town? Is that what you're saying? And you accidentally put in 2021? I'm thinking that's it, because the secular AA organization, they have speakers. Is it once a month? I think is that right, Mary? Once a month from
Yes.
different places.
Mm-hmm.
And like I know Kansas City did it. I know Georgia did it, and I'm wondering if Joe's talking about South Africa there, coming in from Cape Town. And then Bree says, "Is this?" Oh no, he says it was from last year. Oh wow. So they've been doing it for a while. So last year I'm gonna have to check that out. So last year they did have somebody, Ryan from South Africa, speaking on the secular AA meeting. I'll have to send you a link to that so you can listen to it.
Awesome.
Bree is saying, is the CC available? John Mary CC, kind of multitasking here. Had to pull the earplugs. I don't know what CC is. What does that mean?
Not sure. Maybe no idea.
Anyway, enjoyed the podcast. Okay, CC. I don't know what that is. Carbon copy. Well, what will happen is, Bree, is once we finish the live stream, the video will be up here, so you can listen to it anytime. And I will also edit the audio and put it out as just a regular podcast as well in the next couple of weeks. So I plan on doing that with all of our live streams. You know, I wasn't doing that before, but we'll just go ahead and make them available audio either to get a wider audience that way. So
Ryan, I have a quick question for you. In your ARC program, do you not make 12-step meetings available to the people that come to ARC, or do you do group therapy, or how do you how do you stay sober personally, and how do the people that come there do it?
So there's you know, there's workshops, there's groups, there's lectures, there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of introspection that the guys are asked to do. There's a lot of individual counseling or individual psychotherapy that goes on. You know, we get the family involved. We deal with, you know, whoever forms part of the support structure, and we sort of, you know, talk. We spend a lot of time sort of talking about setting up structures so that going forward from treatment, people can stay engaged in a process.
It's important.
Yeah, definitely. So we do make introductions to the 12-step fellowships. It's not shoved down people's throats, and it's not like sort of like demanded that they, you know, like we don't say that they will die if they don't go to, you know, it's like none of that kind of nonsense. But we do make very strong introductions to it, and we've got links to people in the fellowships that are that are solid, and that sort of, you know, like want to help other people, and sort of those guys come in and do H&R sort of stuff from time to time, or like once a week at least. So that's pretty much what goes on there. Yeah.
You're also working on building like what we're doing here, building a community around your podcast.
Yeah, I'm doing a very poor job of it, but
it'll happen over time.
I'm working on it. See, I've sort of ripped off some of your ideas, John, but I'm
glad. Well, it's fun. I wish I would have done it a long time ago, but it's great to connect with people who listen to this podcast, and there's a lot of different ways that you're able to do that. You know, the group meetings, call in, chats like this, live streams, individual conversations. It's great to be able to have that outreach, email, all kinds of different ways of actually talking to people who listen to the podcast. It's cool. And Facebook group, you got your Facebook group going?
Yeah, it's been going for a while, but again, so that's also one of the ADD symptoms. Is I'll go full force and start something, and I'll get busy, and then all of a sudden, like you'll have like a ton of content in the space of 3 weeks, and then I'll move on to
I might
something
be
else.
ADHD. I might be that too. I do the same thing.
Horrible. Yeah.
People who know me have seen that too. Like I remember last year, I would go like periods of time where I put out like 3 podcast episodes a week, and I'm going bam, 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 and then all of a sudden I hit a wall, and I just stop, and I can't. But yeah, I go through these periods of spurts of energy where I got all this creative energy, and I'm just go, 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 and all of a sudden stop. I'm really trying now to pace myself.
Yeah.
And I'm just doing once a week, putting out a podcast episode, and then once a week doing a live stream, and I think I can handle that.
It's like with anything, John. I think consistency, in recovery, in anything, consistency is key, and they say easy does it, right? So
yeah, balance. Do other things in your life other than just being obsessed about one thing. That takes a lot of effort on my part, So. And I was going to the gym, and I'm not now. It just takes one little tiny excuse to not go to the gym.
Yeah.
And it was Omicron was one of them. And then the freaking
That's a good
snow
one.
out here. It was colder than hell out here. So those two, I had 2 reasons not to go to the gym. Now I'm completely out of shape. I got to start all over again. But what I'm trying to say is doing that kind of thing. If I can go to the gym, it gets me out of the house, doing something and thinking about something and being interested in something other than just the podcast. Because if all I do is the podcast, I'm just totally consumed about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the
So
world gets small. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Yeah. But I've always appreciated the fact, John, that you were able to say, I'm going to take a break. I always saw that as a positive, that you were taking care of yourself. And that in the midst of doing something that people loved, you just said, I just need to take a step back for a minute and recharge my batteries. I think that's a great thing. And I always admired you for that.
Well, thank you.
I'm sort of the person that will just slave through it no matter what. And then I'll just be all beat up and I'll keep going. So I think there's a plus in being able to say, I need to take a break and charge again.
Well,
Yeah, because we can go too fast and not take care of ourselves while we're taking care of everyone else.
Well, thank you. That's very nice of you to say. Sometimes I feel like I'm a little bit overly dramatic about it when it happens.
No, I never got. I always thought it was cool that you did it. Actually,
thank you. You're so nice. Well, it's been nice doing this with you. That now our second one. I'm looking forward to more of these live streams and getting to know you better and learning with you as we meet people and go through various topics. We were discussing a possible topic, and maybe we need to talk this over a little bit. But do you still think that it might be a good idea to talk about how we as people in recovery deal with like the world, the situation that's going on in the world? I mean, that there are people that might blow it up. For example, I don't know. There's a lot of anxiety, I think, right now that we just don't talk about. We don't talk about it.
Right. Well, it's the war. I mean, it's hard not to talk about it.
Yeah.
And how do we deal with what we see on the news every single day?
Yeah.
And how do where do we place that grief and fear?
Yeah.
And it does affect every person it's either, everybody deals with it differently. It's either not turning on the news and being completely acting like it's not happening, or, feeling like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. How do you, those are the different ways different people deal with it. How are you feeling about it, Ryan?
Yeah. Obviously you're referring to the war in Ukraine and all of that.
Yes.
So the threat of a nuclear sort of problem happening, I don't know. So I get nihilistic sometimes, and I like sort of, I don't know. It's not a big concern for me, to be honest. I think the increased inflation, that worries me. What kind of future are my kids going to have? But I'm I sort of focus on kind of like, I think my kids I think it's going to get better even if there's a war. I think things are going to improve. I mean, if you look at the people that are directly involved, they're going to have a miserable time. So I'm just going to stay here, like the tip of Africa, and kind of, let them do what they need to do. But generally speaking, I don't think that kind of things really affect us. But yeah, it does cause anxiety. Hey, it does.
Yeah, it's interesting over the last couple of years, really, since March of 2020. That was the date when we all kind of had to go into seclusion because of COVID. Ever since then,
Isolation.
yes, ever since then, I mean, everything has been different. There's been a lot of angst, I think, just in general, with the world order or whatever. I don't know. But yeah, it's impacted me. And I know it's impacted the recovery community, although they're pretty resilient. I mean, it was pretty cool that everybody went on Zoom and we're still connecting, maybe even more so than we were prior to
I love it.
Prior to all of this.
I love Zoom so much. And I know people that say they can't wait to go back to face, but I'm a Zoomer.
You know, that's interesting. We so at work we're working remotely full time, and now they want us to go back like once a week because the guys who run the company, they think it's really important that we build a culture or something, that we have to be together. Well, so I went back to the office and saw people that I hadn't seen in months and months and months, but it didn't feel like I hadn't seen them for a long time because we're still connected remotely. And so I'm just saying, why do we need to come into the office? And all the workers feel that way, but the people who run the company, they're forcing us to come in once a week. They think it's important, but we don't. Anyway,
but having connection,
go ahead, Ryan.
Having connection is important. Being connected it's like I went through it, and I'm pretty sure it's like a lot of people did as well. Like the isolating and you're right, it was devastating. It was quite hard on me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, everything is pre-COVID. I mean, it was the pre-COVID world and post-COVID world. Yeah.
Well, we're coming up on an hour, so let me just go ahead and close with just a couple of announcements, I guess. For those of you who don't know or who might have stumbled upon this live stream after we've recorded it, we do have weekly listener meetings now every Tuesday, and our next one is going to be on March 22nd. It's at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Time. I always do things in Central Time because that's where I live, but you have to Google to figure out what time it is where you live. But the speaker this week is going to be Leah Laux, and she's actually an Al-Anon. And she wrote a really wonderful book called Fireflies: Finding Light on a Journey Through Addiction. The book is a quick read. I think I read it in like 4 or 5 hours, but it's so beautifully written. And she tells the story of her husband's addiction to alcohol, how it impacted her, and the recovery process that they both went through. And she did it in a really short little book, and it was a very hopeful story, very, very inspiring. And I'm looking forward to hearing from her. She's also in our Facebook group. She kind of found our little secular community. She likes it. And then I also do the one-on-one meetings. I make my calendar available. I'll put links to that here in our show notes. And I also put links to your stuff, Ryan, to your YouTube channel, your Facebook group, and your website.
Thanks, John. Cool. Appreciate that.
Well, thank you for being here.
And thank you for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been awesome. Thanks, guys.
And thank you in the live chat for being here, Joe and Lisa and Bree, and gosh, I'm going to forget people, but all of you who participated, it was great to see you again. And we'll be back again next week, probably talking about angst in the world and how we deal with it in recovery. So anyway, with that, I'll say goodbye. Y'all take care now.
Thanks, guys.
Bye. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you,
Ryan.